Hello. Welcome to Storytime with Moog. I am Moog, and today we are reading Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, starting with Part 2, Chapter 26. But first, reading updates. I have finished the first compendium of Invincible. It's very exciting. Um, yeah. It's hard to talk about, so I'll just say like general things. It's only hard to talk about because it's like such a chonky thing. There's 47 issues in the first compendium. So there's a lot that happens, and there's a lot that has happened that is not in the show. So I'll just say like high overall things, but it is about Invincible, who is a superhero, and he is the son of another superhero named Omni-Man. And they are, fighting bad guys, doing the deed. But things are not what they seem. Omni-Man may or may not be who he seems. And it just goes from there. It is a very violent story. There's a lot of blood, a lot of like carnage. So if that's not your thing, this is not the story for you. There are a couple like dated jokes like that aren't super great, but the story overall I do enjoy, and I do like there's other superheroes in this story, and I do like their different powers that they have. Like Eve is one of the heroes, and she can create anything by just like manipulating molecules, and I think that's really cool. Like atoms, and I think that's really cool because it's just like a limitation on like her like what she can create type of a thing, and I think that's really interesting and really fun. And I read a very short graphic novel, the first book called Clementine. It's part of a trilogy, and it is a graphic novel, and it deals with Clementine, who is a super minor character in Walking Dead. And it is a junior novel, so it's more like chapter book age, and it's okay. It's a solid story for that age. I'm not the target audience, so I could only get so much out of it that I was allowed, if that makes sense. Like it wasn't an amazing story, but I think maybe if I was the target audience was that age, that I feel like I would have really liked it. It is zombies, it is survival, but with like kids, well, they're like 15, 16, like that age. uh but yeah, I overall enjoyed it, and I think I would have liked it more if I was that age. However, if you know somebody that age and they're into zombies, that would be a recommendation, I guess. But today we're continuing Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, and I'm so excited. We are on part 2, chapter 26, the last time that we read, if we can remember, because it was a while ago, big news happened. Two big events happened. One. One. Vronsky goes to Anna and is very excited to see her, and they've been having this like secret tryst for a while, which isn't so secret because everybody pretty much knows it except Anna's husband, and is like, they're just friends. I've talked to Anna. Anna knows not to do this to our family, not to do this to our son or herself. But Vronsky goes there. Anna is in a mood and he can't figure out why. And Anna tells him that she is with child. And Vronsky's very excited. He's like, great. This is the excuse you need. Let's run away together. And Anna is like, no, I can't do that. She's saying all of these different reasons, but her real reason, the reason that she's not saying, is for her son, for her already born son, um, Siroiza, because she doesn't want him to grow up without her being in his life, and doesn't want him to grow up knowing that she left him for another family. And so that's huge. And so, of course, Vronsky leaves very distracted, everything like that. And he goes to a horse race, but it's not like a regular horse race. It's not like a regular horse race. It's like one of those, I forgot what it's called, but it's one of those that has like a bunch of different obstacles and, like leaps and ditches and like all of those things. And so he does that, and his mind isn't really on the race. He's thinking about Anna, and the horse is a horse, of course. So they're galloping along. Oh, Vronsky is the jockey. I should have said that. They're galloping along and they go to a like double wide jump, and in the air, like the horse, like something happens. Like it's like it tweaked, whatever. It lands wrong and breaks its back. I hate that. And then whoever, the owner of the horse, the owner of the track, the owner of the race, I don't know, somebody of some sort of authority comes over, sees that they cannot save the horse, and shoots the horse. And that's where we ended. Okay, so I had no problem remembering what happened last time because these things were insane. So let's do it. Part 2, Chapter 26. The external relations of Alexei Alexandrovitch and his wife had remained unchanged. The sole difference lay in the fact that he was more busily occupied than ever, as in former years. At the beginning of the spring he had gone to a foreign watering place for the sake of his health, deranged by the winter's work that every year grew heavier. And just as always he returned in July and at once fell to work, as usual, with increased energy. As usual, too, his wife had moved for the summer to a villa out of town while he remained in Petersburg. From the date of their conversation after the party at Princess Tverskaya's, he had never spoken again to Anna of his suspicions and his jealousies, and that habitual tone of his bantering mimicry was the most convenient tone possible for his present attitude to his wife. He was a little colder to his wife. He simply seemed to be slightly displeased with her for that first midnight conversation, which she had repelled. In his attitude to her there was a shade of vexation, but nothing more. "You would not be open with me," he seemed to say, mentally addressing her. "So much the worse for you. Now, you may beg as you please, but I won't be open with you. So much the worse for you," he said mentally, like a man who, after vainly attempting to extinguish a fire, should fly in a rage with his vain efforts and say, "Oh, very well then, you shall burn for this." This man, so subtle and astute in official life, did not realize all the senselessness of such an attitude to his wife. He did not realize it because it was too terrible to him to realize his actual position, and he shut down and locked and sealed up in his heart that secret place where lay hid his feelings towards his family, that is, his wife and son. He who had been such a careful father had from the end of that winter become peculiarly frigid to his son, and adopted to him just the same bantering tone he used with his wife. "Aha, young man," was the greeting with which he met him. Alexei Alexandrovitch asserted and believed that he had never in any previous year had so much official business as that year. But he was not aware that he sought work for himself that year, that this was one of the means for keeping shut that secret place where lay hid his feelings towards his wife and son and his thoughts about them, which became more terrible the longer they lay there. If anyone had had the right to ask Alexei Alexandrovitch what he thought of his wife's behavior, the mild and peaceable Alexei Alexandrovitch would have made no answer. but he would have been greatly angered with any man who should question him on that subject. For this reason, there positively came into Alexey Alexandrovich's face a look of haughtiness and severity whenever anyone inquired after his wife's health. Alexey Alexandrovich did not want to think at all about his wife's behavior, and he actually succeeded in not thinking about it at all. Alexey Alexandrovich's permanent summer villa was in Peterhof, and the Countess Lydia Ivanovna used as a rule to spend the summer there, close to Anna, and constantly seeing her. That year, Countess Lydia Ivanovna declined to settle in Peterhof, was not once at Anna Arkadyevna's, and in conversation with Alexey Alexandrovich hinted at the unsuitability of Anna's close intimacy with Betsy and Vronsky. Alexey Alexandrovich sternly cut her short, roundly declaring his wife to be above suspicion, and from that time began to avoid Countess Lydia Ivanovna. He did not want to see, and did not see, that many people in society cast dubious glances on his wife. He did not want to understand, and did not understand, why his wife had so particularly insisted on staying in Tsarskoe, where Betsy was staying, and not far from the camp of Vronsky's regiment. He did not allow himself to think about it, and he did not think about it. But all the same, though he never admitted it to himself, and had no proofs, not even suspicious evidence, in the bottom of his heart he knew, beyond all doubt, that he was a deceived husband, and he was profoundly miserable about it. How often during those 8 years of happy life with his wife Alexey Alexandrovich had looked at other men's faithless wives and other deceived husbands and asked himself, how can people descend to that? How is it they don't put an end to such a hideous position? But now, when the misfortune had come upon himself, he was so far from thinking of putting an end to the position that he would not recognize it at all, would not recognize it just because it was too awful, too unnatural. Since his return from abroad, Alexey Alexandrovich had twice been at their country villa. Once he dined there, another time he spent the evening there with a party of friends. But he had not once stayed the night there, as it had been his habit to do in previous years. The day of the races had been a very busy day for Alexey Alexandrovich, but when mentally sketching out the day in the morning, he made up his mind to go to their country house to see his wife immediately after dinner, and from there to the races, which all the court were to witness, and at which he was bound to be present. He was going to see his wife, because he had determined to see her once a week to keep up appearances. And besides, on that day, as it was the 15th, he had to give his wife some money for her expenses, according to their usual arrangement. With his habitual control over his thoughts, though he thought all this about his wife, he did not let his thoughts stray further in regard to her. That morning was a very full one for Alexey Alexandrovich. The evening before, Countess Lydia Ivanovna had sent him a pamphlet by a celebrated traveler in China who was staying in Petersburg, and with it she enclosed a note begging him to see the traveler himself, as he was an extremely interesting person from various points of view, and likely to be useful. Alexey Alexandrovich had not had time to read the pamphlet through in the evening, and finished it in the morning. Then people began arriving with petitions, and there came the reports, interviews, appointments, dismissals, apportionment of rewards, pensions, grants, notes, the work-day round, as Alexey Alexandrovich called it, that always took up so much time. Then there was private business of his own. a visit from the doctor and the steward who managed his property. The steward did not take up much time. He simply gave Alexey Alexandrovitch the money he needed, together with a brief statement of the position of his affairs, which was not altogether satisfactory, as it had happened that during that year, owing to increased expenses, more had been paid out than usual, and there was a deficit. But the doctor, a celebrated Petersburg doctor, who was an intimate acquaintance of Alexey Alexandrovitch, took up a great deal of time. Alexey Alexandrovitch had not expected him that day, and was surprised at his visit, and still more so when the doctor questioned him very carefully about his health, listened to his breathing, and tapped at his liver. Alexey Alexandrovitch did not know that his friend Lydia Ivanovna, noticing that he was not as well as usual that year, had begged the doctor to go and examine him. "Do this for my sake," the Countess Lydia Ivanovna had said to him. "I will do it for the sake of Russia, Countess," replied the doctor. "A priceless man," said the Countess Lydia Ivanovna. The doctor was extremely dissatisfied with Alexey Alexandrovitch. He found the liver considerably enlarged, and the digestive powers weakened, while the course of mineral waters had been quite without effect. He prescribed more physical exercise as far as possible, and as far as possible less mental strain, and above all, no worry. In other words, just what was as much out of Alexey Alexandrovitch's power as abstaining from breathing. Then he withdrew, leaving in Alexey Alexandrovitch an unpleasant sense that something was wrong with him, and that there was no chance of curing it. As he was coming away, the doctor chanced to meet on the staircase an acquaintance of his, Sludin, who was secretary of Alexey Alexandrovitch's department. They had been comrades at the university, and though they rarely met, they thought highly of each other, and were excellent friends, and so there was no one to whom the doctor would have given his opinion of a patient so freely as to Sludin. "How glad I am you've been seeing him," said Sludin. "He's not well, and I fancy... Well, what do you think of him?" "I'll tell you," said the doctor, beckoning over Sludin's head to his coachman to bring the carriage round. "It's just this," said the doctor, taking a finger of his kid glove in his white hands and pulling it. "If you don't strain the strings, and then try to break them, you'll find it a difficult job, but strain a string to its very utmost, and the mere weight of one finger on the strained string will snap it, and with this close assiduity, his conscientious devotion to his work, he's strained to the utmost, and there's some outside burden weighing on him, and not a light one," concluded the doctor, raising his eyebrows significantly. "Will you be at the races?" he added, as he sank into his seat in the carriage. Yes, to be sure. It does not waste a lot of time," the doctor responded vaguely to some reply of Sludin's he had not caught. No, directly after the doctor, who had taken up so much time, came the celebrated traveler and Alexey Alexandrovitch, by means of the pamphlet he had only just finished reading and his previous acquaintance with the subject, impressed the traveler by the depth of his knowledge of the subject and the breadth and enlightenment of his view of it. At the same time as the traveler there was announced a provincial marshal of nobility on a visit to Petersburg, with whom Alexey Alexandrovitch had to have some conversation. After his departure, he had to finish the daily routine of business with his secretary, and then he still had to drive round to call on a certain great personage on a matter of grave and serious import. Alexey Alexandrovitch only just managed to be back by 5 o'clock, his dinner hour, and after dinner with his secretary, he invited him to drive with him to his country villa and to the races. Though he did not acknowledge it to himself, Alexey Alexandrovitch always tried nowadays to secure the presence of a third person in his interviews with his wife. End of chapter 26. Ooh, just that, like, okay, so much happened in this. Not like plot, but character. The last line, the last little snippet that Alexei has been trying to insert a third person when he has interactions with his wife. So telling. So telling from like a character and relationship standpoint. Um so yeah, it plot point, it went through his day, through the day leading up to the races, which we already experienced the races from Vronsky's perspective. And yeah, like he had a doctor's office, he had a doctor's visit. His liver is doing weird things and he needs to avoid stress and he needs to, exercise more and all of these, the same thing that doctors tell you now. And at the same time, like while his day is happening, he's still thinking and still has the weight of knowing that about his wife and her extramarital activities. And he doesn't have proof. He's not able to be like, point out, he doesn't have like a wall with like evidence, but he knows. Everybody knows. And he's trying to just like keep up appearances. He makes sure that he is seen in public with his wife once a week. He makes sure that she gets the money that she needs, to uphold her lifestyle for, whatever. So it is interesting that we're getting like his side after the like main discussion that he had with her about like don't do this. People are going to talk. They're already talking and that sort of thing. Interesting. Interesting. That day tells us so much about him. Yeah. Yeah, it really does. He crosses the T's and dots the I's, but what's going on inside there? Yeah, and this was definitely like peeling back the curtain to see. Because from the outside, he's like super functioning, highly productive, regimented type of a guy. But also he's dealing with all of the other stuff, which is cool. Chapter 27. Anna was upstairs, standing before the looking glass and, with Anushka's assistance, pinning the last ribbon on her gown when she heard the carriage wheels crunching the gravel at the entrance. "Well, it's too early for Betsy," she thought, and glancing out of the window she caught sight of the carriage and the black hat of Alexey Alexandrovitch, and the ears that she knew so well sticking up each side of it. How unlucky. Can he be going to stay the night? She wondered. And the thought of all that might come of such a chance struck her as so awful and terrible that, without dwelling on it for a moment, she went down to meet him with a bright and radiant face. And conscious of the presence of that spirit of falsehood and deceit in herself that she had come to know of late, she abandoned herself to that spirit and began talking, hardly knowing what she was saying. "Ah, how nice of you," she said, giving her husband her hand and greeting Sludin, who was like one of the family, with a smile. "You're staying the night, I hope?" was the first word the spirit of falsehood prompted her to utter. "And now we'll go together. Only it's a pity I've promised Betsy. She's coming for me." Alexey Alexandrovitch knit his brows at Betsy's name. "Oh, I'm not going to separate the inseparables," he said in his usual bantering voice. "I'm going with Mihail Vasilyevich. Vasilyevich. Mihail Vasilyevich. I'm ordered exercise by the doctors, too. I'll walk and fancy myself at the springs again." "Oh, there's no hurry," said Anna. "Would you like tea?" She rang. "Bring in tea and tell Siroisa and that Alexey Alexandrovitch is here. Well, tell me, how have you been, Mihail Vasily Vasilyevich, you've not been to see me before. Look how lovely it is out on the terrace, she said, turning first to one and then to the other. She spoke very simply and naturally, but too much and too fast. She was the more aware of this from noticing in the inquisitive look Mihail Vasilyevich turned on her that he was, as it were, keeping watch on her. Mihail Vasilyevich promptly went out on the terrace. She sat down beside her husband. "You don't look quite well," she said. "Yes," he said. "The doctor's been with me today and wasted an hour of my time. I feel that someone of our friends must have sent him. My health's so precious, it seems." "No, what did he say?" She questioned him about his health and what he had been doing, and tried to persuade him to take a rest and come out to her. All this she said brightly, rapidly, and with a peculiar brilliance in her eyes. But Alexey Alexandrovitch did not now attach any special significance to this tone of hers. He heard only her words and gave them only the direct sense they bore, and he answered simply, though jestingly. There was nothing remarkable in all this conversation, but never after could Anna recall this brief scene without an agonizing pain of shame. Siroysa came in preceded by his governess. If Alexey Alexandrovitch had allowed himself to observe, he would have noticed the timid and bewildered eyes with which Siroysa glanced first at his father and then at his mother. But he would not see anything, and he did not see it. "Ah, the young man, he's grown. Really, he's getting quite a man. How are you, young man?" And he gave his hand to the scared child. Siroysa had been shy of his father before, and now, ever since Alexey Alexandrovitch had taken to calling him young man, and since that insoluble question had occurred to him whether Vronsky were a friend or a foe, he avoided his father. He looked round toward his mother as though seeking shelter, and it was only with his mother that he was at ease. Meanwhile, Alexey Alexandrovitch was holding his son by the shoulder while he was speaking to the governess, and Siroysa was so miserably uncomfortable that Anna saw he was on the point of tears. Anna, who had flushed a little in the instant her son came in, noticing that Siroysa was uncomfortable, got up hurriedly, took Alexey Alexandrovitch's hand from her son's shoulder, and kissing the boy, led him out onto the terrace, and quickly came back. "It's time to start, though," said she, glancing at her watch. "How is it Betsy doesn't come?" "Yes," said Alexey Alexandrovitch, and getting up, he folded his hands and cracked his fingers. "I've come to bring you some money, too, for nightingales, we know, can't live on fairy tales," he said. "You want it, I expect?" "No, I don't. Yes, I do," she said, not looking at him and crimsoning to the roots of her hair. "But you'll come back here after the races, I suppose?" "Oh, yes," answered Alexey Alexandrovitch. "And here's the glory of Peterhof, Princess Tverskaya," he added, looking out the window at the elegant English carriage with the tiny seats placed extremely high. "What elegance! Charming. Well, let us be starting too, then." Princess Tverskaya did not get out of her carriage, but her groom, in high boots, a cape, and black hat, darted out at the entrance. "I'm going. Goodbye," said Anna, and kissing her son, she went up to Alexey Alexandrovitch and held out her hand to him. "It was ever so nice of you to come." Alexey Alexandrovitch kissed her hand. "Well, au revoir, then. You'll come back for some tea? That's delightful," she said, and went out, happy and radiant. But as soon as she no longer saw him, she was aware of the spot on her hand that his lips had touched, and she shuddered with repulsion. End of chapter 27. Short one. Okay, so still the same day, still the race day. We're still following Alexei And he goes to where Anna is staying for the summer to deliver her allowance, as well as just making an appearance with somebody else to be like, I'm seeing my wife. This is a normal thing that I do all of the time. But that third party is also like breaking up the like weirdness and tension between them. So it is a bit uncomfortable. Anna wasn't super excited to see him, and to make up for that, and to make up for the thought that she had of hoping that he was not going to stay the night, she's overly friendly, overly bubbly, overly excited to see him. Rosa, their child, comes out and doesn't really know how to act in front of his father, which I think it's weird that even to the governess, Anna was like, tell Rosa that Alexei Alexandrovich is here, instead of being like, tell my son that his father is here. Like, it was very, very formal. But Siroiza does not know how to act because he is picking up on the weirdness of how to behave around Vronsky and doesn't know, like, is Vronsky a good person to be around? Like, should I be nice to him? Or is he somebody who's going to harm me and my family? And should I be, like, weary of him? So that's all added on top of that. And yeah, so it's just very like very stilted conversation, and then they like go and leave. But that was a nice peek into their relationship and like how it has been since Vronsky has like come to Petersburg and professed his love and his want for Anna to leave. She's repelled, not revolted. I think I don't think you're reading too much into it. I think it is definitely like a choice that Tolstoy made. And I think that she's not like disgusted or revolted by her husband, and maybe this is my first time reading it. I am not a huge like I haven't dove into the like intricacies of studying Tolstoy's work, but it could be that like she is being repulsed by her, her guilt, her, I don't know, her like confusion in how she's feeling and the situation that she's finding herself in. And it's not her husband that she finds disgusting, but rather just like a pull away from him. Chapter 28. When Alexei Alexandrovich reached the horse race, Anna was already sitting in the pavilion beside Betsy, in that pavilion where all the highest society had gathered. She caught sight of her husband in the distance. Two men, her husband and her lover, were the two centers of her existence, and unaided by her external senses, she was aware of their nearness. She was aware of her husband approaching a long way off, and she could not help following him in the surging crowd in the midst of which he was moving. She watched his progress towards the pavilion, saw him now responding condescendingly to an ingratiating bow, now exchanging friendly, nonchalant greetings with his equals, now assiduously trying to catch the eye of some great one of this world, and taking off his big hat that squeezed the tip of his ears. All these ways of his she knew, and all were hateful to her. Nothing but ambition, nothing but the desire to get on. That's all there is in his soul, she thought. As for these lofty ideals, love of culture, religion, they are only so many tools for getting on. From his glances towards the ladies' pavilion, he was staring straight at her, but did not distinguish his wife in the sea of muslin, ribbons, feathers, parasols, and flowers. She saw that he was looking for her, but she purposely avoided noticing him. Alexei Alexandrovich, Princess Betsy called to him. I'm sure you don't see your wife. Here she is. He smiled, his chilly smile. There's so much splendor here that one's eyes are dazzled, he said, and he went into the pavilion. He smiled to his wife as a man should smile on meeting his wife after only just parting from her, and greeted the princess and other acquaintances, giving to each what was due, that is to say, jesting with the ladies and dealing out friendly greetings among the men. Below, near the pavilion, was standing an adjutant general of whom Alexey Alexandrovitch had a high opinion, noted for his intelligence and culture. Alexey Alexandrovitch entered into conversation with him. There was an interval between the races, and so nothing hindered conversation. The adjutant general expressed his disapproval of races. Alexey Alexandrovitch replied, defending them. Anna heard his high, measured tones, not losing one word, and every word struck her as false, and stabbed her ears with pain. When the 3-mile steeplechase was beginning, she bent forward and gazed with fixed eyes at Vronsky as he went up to his horse and mounted, and at the same time she heard that loathsome and never-ceasing voice of her husband. She was in agony of terror for Vronsky, but a still greater agony was the never-ceasing, as it seemed to her, stream of her husband's shrill voice, with its familiar intonations. I'm a wicked woman, a lost woman, she thought, but I don't like lying. I can't endure falsehood, while as for him, her husband, it's the breath of his life, falsehood. He knows all about it. He sees it all. What does he care if he can talk so calmly? If he were to kill me, if he were to kill Vronsky, I might respect him. No, all he wants is falsehood and propriety, Anna said to herself, not considering exactly what it was she wanted of her husband, and how she would have liked to see him behave. She did not understand, either, that Alexey Alexandrovitch's peculiar loquacity that day, so exasperating to her, was merely the expression of his inward distress and uneasiness. As a child that has been hurt skips about, putting all his muscles into movement to drown the pain, in the same way Alexey Alexandrovitch needed a mental exercise to drown the thoughts of his wife, that in her presence, and in Vronsky's, and with the continual iteration of his name, would force themselves on her attention. And it was as natural for him to talk well and cleverly as it is natural for a child to skip about. He was saying, danger in the races of officers, of cavalrymen, is an essential element in the race. If England can point to the most brilliant feat of cavalry in military history, it is simply owing to the fact that she has historically developed this force both in beasts and in men. Sport has, in my opinion, a great value, and as is always the case, we see nothing but what is most superficial. "Oh, it's not superficial," said Princess Tverskaya. "One of the officers, they say, has broken 2 ribs." Alexey Alexandrovitch smiled his smile, which uncovered his teeth, but revealed nothing more. "Well, we'll admit, Princess, that that's not superficial," he said, "but internal. But that's not the point." And he again, to the general with whom he was talking seriously, "We mustn't forget that those who are taking part in the race are military men, who have chosen that career, and one must allow that every calling has its disagreeable side. It forms an integral part of the duties of an officer. Low sports, such as prize fighting or Spanish bullfights, are a sign of barbarity, but specialized trials of skill are a sign of development." "No, I shan't come another time. It's too upsetting," said Princess Betsy. "Isn't it, Anna?" "Oh, it is upsetting, but one can't tear oneself away," said another lady. "If I'd been a Roman woman, I should never have missed a single circus." Anna said nothing, and keeping her opera glass up, gazed always at the same spot. At that moment, a tall general walked through the pavilion, breaking off what he was saying. Alexei Alexandrovitch got up hurriedly, though with dignity, and bowed low to the general. "You're not racing?" the officer asked, chaffing him. "My race is a harder one," Alexei Alexandrovitch responded deferentially. And though the answer meant nothing, the general looked as though he had heard a witty remark from a witty man, and fully relished la pointe de la sauce. "There are two aspects," Alexei Alexandrovitch resumed. "Those who take part and those who look on, and love for those spectacles is an unmistakable proof of a low degree of development in the spectator, I admit, but—" "Princess Bets!" sounded Stepan Arkadyevitch's voice from below, addressing Betsy. "Who's your favorite?" "Anna and I are for Kuzovlev," replied Betsy. "I'm for Vronsky. A pair of gloves?" "Done." "But it is a pretty sight, isn't it?" Alexei Alexandrovitch paused while there was talking about him, but he began again directly. "I admit that many sports do not—" he was continuing. But at that moment the racers started, and all conversation ceased. Alexei Alexandrovitch, too, was silent, and everyone stood up and turned towards the stream. Alexei Alexandrovitch took no interest in the race, and so he did not watch the racers, but fell listlessly to scanning the spectators with his weary eyes. His eyes rested upon Anna. Her face was white and set. She was obviously seeing nothing and no one but one man. Her hand had convulsively clutched her fan, and she held her breath. She looked at her, and hastily turned away, scrutinizing other faces. "But here's this lady, too, and they're very much moved as well. It's very natural," Alexei Alexandrovitch told himself. He tried not to look at her, but unconsciously his eyes were drawn to her. He examined that face again, trying not to read what was so plainly written on it, and against his own will, with horror, read on it what he did not want to know. The first fall, Kuzlovlev, at the stream, agitated everyone, but Alexei Alexandrovitch saw distinctly on Anna's pale, triumphant face that the man she was watching had not fallen. When, after Mooog and Vronsky had cleared the worst barrier, the next officer had been thrown straight on his head, and it had fatally injured, and a shudder of horror passed over the whole public, Alexei Alexandrovitch saw that Anna did not even notice it, and had some difficulty in realizing what they were talking of about her. But more and more often, and with greater persistence, he watched her. Anna, wholly engrossed as she was with the race, became aware of her husband's cold eyes fixed upon her from one side. She glanced round for an instant, looked inquiringly at him, and, with a slight frown, turned away again. "Oh, I don't care," she seemed to say to him, and she did not glance at him again. The race was an unlucky one, and of the 17 officers who rode in it, more than half were thrown and hurt. Towards the end of the race, everyone was in a state of agitation, which was intensified by the fact that the Tsar was displeased. End of chapter 28. Okay, chapter 28. We are at the races once again, but instead of with Vronsky, we're hanging out with Anna and with Alexei and Betsy. And who else is there but Stepan Arkadyevitch? Amazing. The whole crew. And we get Anna's perspective in that she is just finding her husband's voice to be just so grating, and the way that he's acting just to be so irritating, because he's acting like there's nothing wrong, like everything is great and happy and wonderful, and it's not. And she wants a reaction from him, and she just wants him to care, because obviously he doesn't care if he's able to just continue on in society like he always has. Not the case. As we know from his chapters and from just like little snippets of what's going on in his old noggin. And so the race has happened, and Anna is just focusing so intently, but only on one rider, one person, because when other riders and other horses have been injured or thrown or whatever the case is, she's not reacting. She's not reacting to the horror and to the upset because it wasn't that one rider that she was watching. And so she is so intense, and Alexia realizes this and is just watching Anna watch the race. And she like feels, you know how you can like just feel when somebody's watching you? She feels that. And so she turns and she like sees that he's watching her, and she's like, "Oh, whatever, like I don't really care about this race." We know you do. We know you do. And the race ends, and it talks about like how more than half of the riders have been thrown from their horse in some instance. Wild. Yeah, or killed. Or killed. Right. So injured or killed, and she's just like not noticing any of that. Even when the rest of the pavilion that she's with are like gasping and like shouting and reacting very animatedly. Like she's not. She's locked in. She's in the zone. It's just early NASCAR. Chapter 29. Everyone was loudly expressing disapprobation. Everyone was repeating a phrase someone had uttered. The lions and gladiators will be the next thing. And everyone was feeling horrified. So that when Vronsky fell to the ground and Anna moaned aloud, there was nothing very out of the way in it. But afterwards, a change came over Anna's face which really was beyond decorum. She utterly lost her head. She began fluttering like a caged bird. At one moment would have gone up and moved away. At the next, turned to Betsy. "Let us go. Let us go," she said. But Betsy did not hear her. She was bending down, talking to a general who had come up to her. Alexey Alexandrovitch went up to Anna and courteously offered her his arm. "Let us go, if you like," he said in French. But Anna was listening to the general and did not notice her husband. "He's broken his leg, too, so they say," the general was saying. "This is beyond everything." Without answering her husband, Anna lifted her opera glass and gazed towards the place where Vronsky had fallen. But it was so far off, and there was such a crowd of people about it, that she could make out nothing. She laid down the opera glass and would have moved away, but at that moment an officer galloped up and made some announcement to the Tsar. Anna craned forward, listening. "Stiva! Stiva!" she cried to her brother. But her brother did not hear her. Again, she would have moved away. "One more I offer you, my arm. Once more I offer you my arm if you want to be going," said Alexey Alexandrovitch, reaching towards her hand. She drew back from him with aversion, and without looking in his face answered, "No, no, let me be. I'll stay." She saw now that from the place of Vronsky's accident an officer was running across the course towards the pavilion. Betsy waved her handkerchief to him. The officer brought the news that the rider was not killed, but the horse had broken its back. On hearing this, Anna sat down hurriedly and hid her face in her fan. Alexey Alexandrovitch saw that she was weeping and could not control her tears, nor even the sobs that were shaking her bosom. Alexey Alexandrovitch stood so as to screen her, giving her time to recover herself. "For the third time, I offer you my arm," he said to her after a little time, turning to her. Anna gazed at him and did not know what to say. "Princess Betsy, came to her rescue. "No, Alexey Alexandrovitch, I brought Anna and I must take her home," put in Betsy. "Excuse me, princess," he said, smiling courteously, but looking her very firmly in the face. "But I see that Anna's not well, and I wish her to come home with me." Anna looked about her in a frightened way, got up submissively, and laid her hand on her husband's arm. "I'll send to him and find out, and let you know," Betsy whispered to her. As they left the pavilion, Alexey Alexandrovitch, as always, talked to those he met, and Anna had, as always, to talk and answer. But she was utterly beside herself, and moved, hanging on her husband's arm as though in a dream. Is he killed or not? Is it true? Will he come or not? Shall I see him today? She was thinking. She took her seat in her husband's carriage in silence, and in silence drove out of the crowd of carriages. In spite of all he had seen, Alexey Alexandrovitch still did not allow himself to consider his wife's real condition. He merely saw the outward symptoms. He saw that she was behaving unbecomingly, and considered it his duty to tell her so. But it was very difficult for him not to say more, to tell her nothing but that. He opened his mouth to tell her she had behaved unbecomingly, but he could not help saying something utterly different. "What an inclination we all have, though, for these cruel spectacles," he said. "I observe—" "Huh? I don't understand," said Anna contemptuously. He was offended, and at once began to say what he had meant to say. "I'm obliged to tell you," he began. "So now we are to have it out," she thought, and she felt frightened. "I am obliged to tell you that your behavior has been unbecoming today," he said to her in French. "In what way was my behavior unbecoming?" she said out loud, turning her head swiftly and looking him straight in the face, not with the bright expression that seemed covering something, but with a look of determination, under which she concealed with difficulty the dismay she was feeling. "Mind," he said, pointing to the open window opposite the coachman. He got up and pulled up the window. "What did you consider unbecoming?" she repeated. "The despair you were unable to conceal at the accident to one of the riders." He waited for her to answer, but she was silent, looking straight before her. "I have already begged you so to conduct yourself in society that even malicious tongues can find nothing to say against you. There was a time when I spoke of your inward attitude, but I am not speaking of that now. Now I speak only of your external attitude. You have behaved improperly, and I would wish it not to occur again." She did not hear half of what he was saying. She felt panic-stricken before him, and was thinking whether it was true that Vronsky was not killed. Was it of him they were speaking when they said the rider was unhurt, but the horse had broken its back? She merely smiled with a pretense of irony when he finished, and made no reply, because she had not heard what he had said. Alexey Alexandrovitch had begun to speak boldly, but as he realized plainly what he was speaking of, the dismay she was feeling inflicted him too. He saw the smile, and a strange misapprehension came over him. She is smiling at my suspicions. Yes, she will tell me directly what she told me before, that there is no foundation for my suspicions, and that it's absurd. At that moment, when the revelation of everything was hanging over him, there was nothing he expected so much as that she would answer mockingly as before, that his suspicions were absurd and utterly groundless. So terrible to him was what he knew that now he was ready to believe anything. But the expression of her face, scared and gloomy, did not now promise even deception. "Possibly I was mistaken," he said. "If so, I beg your pardon." "No, you were not mistaken," she said deliberately, looking desperately into his cold face. "You were not mistaken. I was, and I could not help being in despair. I hear you, but I am thinking of him. I love him. I am his mistress. I can't bear you. I'm afraid of you, and I hate you. You can do what you like to me." And dropping back into the corner of the carriage, she broke into sobs, hiding her face in her hands. Alexey Alexandrovitch did not stir, and kept looking straight before him. But his whole face suddenly bore the solemn rigidity of the dead, and his expression did not change during the whole time of the drive home. On reaching the house, he turned his head to her, still with the same expression. "Very well. But I expect a strict observance of the external forms of propriety till such time," his voice shook, "as I may take measures to secure my honor and communicate them to you." He got out first and helped her to get out. Before the servants, he pressed her hand, took his seat in the carriage, and drove back to Petersburg. Immediately afterwards, a footman came from Princess Betsy and brought Anna a note. "I sent to Alexey to find out how he is, and he writes me he is quite well and unhurt, but in despair." "So he will be here," she thought. "What a good thing I told him all." She glanced at her watch. She had still 3 hours to wait, and the memories of their last meeting set her blood in flame. My God, how light it is. It's dreadful, but I do love to see his face, and I do love this fantastic light. My husband. Oh, yes. Well, thank God, everything's over with him. End of chapter 29. We have the end of the race, and Anna is shooketh. She doesn't know if she wants to stay, and she doesn't know if she wants to leave. She wants to leave because she is frightened of hearing the news of what happened to Vronsky, but she wants to stay so that she can hear what happened to Vronsky and know that he's okay. And so she's very agitated, and Alexey Alexandrovich sees this and asks Anna 3 times deliberately to leave. He's like, "I see you're ready to leave. Let us go." And 2 times she's just like distracted, doesn't even hear him. The 3rd time she notices but is unable to answer because she is just like dumbstruck. And Betsy comes in and is like, "Oh, she came with me. I will drive her home." And Alexia is like, no, she's obviously distraught and unwell. I will take my wife home." And so in the carriage, they hash it out, and Alexei is going on and like talking and has just kind of started to delude himself and convince himself like, "Oh, Anna is just going to tell me that these suspicions again are unfounded and I have nothing to worry about because she's smiling as I'm talking." But she's smiling as he's talking because she's not even listening to what he's saying. She's only thinking about Vronsky. And so she says that. She's like, "I'm not listening to you. I only have room for Vronsky, and I kind of hate you. I don't want to be around you." And then she's like, "Do with that information what you will," and then just starts sobbing. And so they drop her off. And like what he was trying to say was like, "You have been unbecoming. Like you're being very obvious in society that we are not together and that our marriage is not solid, and you need to like shape up and get it together when we're in society." That's what he was trying to say, what he was actually saying. And oopsie doodle, doesn't seem like that's gonna happen. And so Alexei drops her off and then leaves, and Anna gets word that Vronsky is doing fine. He's not dead. And so she is relieved and is just like, feels so much better. She's like, oh, that's great. It means that Vronsky is going to come here tonight and I won't have to deal with my husband. Oh, I am really enjoying this. I'm enjoying this story so much. This is only part two. There are 8 parts. We are only like a quarter of the way through. Buckle up, buttercups. We're doing this. All right. Chapter 30. In the little German watering place to which the Shtcherbatskoys had betaken themselves, as in all places indeed where people are gathered together, the usual process, as it were, of the crystallization of society went on, assigning to each member of that society a definite and unadulterable place, just as the particle of water in frost, indefinitely and unadulterably, taking the special form of the crystal of snow, so each new person that arrived at the springs was at once placed in his special place. First, Schtscherbazkoi, samt Gemahl und Tochter, by the apartments they took, and from their name and from the friends they made, were immediately crystallized into a definite place marked out for them. There was visiting the water place that year a real German Fürsten, in consequence of which the crystallizing process went on more vigorously than ever. Princess Shtcherbatskaya wished, above everything, to present her daughter to this German princess, and the day after their arrival she duly performed this rite. Kitty made a low and graceful curtsy in the very simple, that is to say, very elegant frock that had been ordered her from Paris. The German princess said, "I hope the roses will come back to this pretty little face." And for the Shtcherbatskoys, certain definite lines of existence were at once laid down from which there was no departing. The Shtcherbatskoys made the acquaintance, too, of the family of an English Lady Somebody, and of a German countess and her son, wounded in the last war, and of a learned Swede, and of Monsieur Canute and his sister. But yet, inevitably, the Shtcherbatskoys were thrown most into the society of a Moscow lady, Maria Yevgenyevna Rdyshev, and her daughter, whom Kitty disliked, because she had fallen ill, like herself, over a love affair, and a Moscow colonel, whom Kitty had known from childhood, and always seen in uniform and epaulets, and who now, with his little eyes and his open neck and flowered cravat, was uncommonly ridiculous and tedious, because there was no getting rid of him. When all this was so firmly established, Kitty began to be very much bored, especially as the prince went away to Carlsbad, and she was left alone with her mother. She took no interest in the people she knew, feeling that nothing fresh would come of them. Her chief mental interest in the watering place consisted in watching and making theories about the people she did not know. It was characteristic of Kitty that she always imagined everything in people in the most favorable light possible, especially so in those she did not know. And now, as she made surmises as to who people were, what were their relations to one another, and what they were like, Kitty endowed them with the most marvelous and noble characters, and found confirmation of her idea in her observations. Of these people, the one that attracted her most was a Russian girl who had come to the watering place with an invalid Russian lady, Madame Stahl, as everyone called her. Madame Stahl belonged to the highest society, but she was so ill that she could not walk, and only on exceptionally fine days made her appearance at the springs in an invalid carriage. But it was not so much from ill health as from pride. So Princess Shtcherbatskaya interpreted it, that Madame Stahl had not made the acquaintance of anyone among the Russians there. The Russian girl looked after Madame Stahl, and besides that, she was, as Kitty observed, on friendly terms with all the invalids who were seriously ill. And there were many of them at the Springs, and looked after them in the most natural way. This Russian girl was not, as Kitty gathered, related to Madame Stahl, nor was she a paid attendant. Madame Stahl called her Varenka, and other people called her Mademoiselle Varenka. Apart from the interest Kitty took in this girl's relations with Madame Stahl and with other unknown persons, Kitty, as often happened, felt an inexplicable attraction to Mademoiselle Varenka, and was aware, when their eyes met, that she, too, liked her. Of Mademoiselle Varenka, one would not say that she had passed her first youth, but she was, as it were, a creature without youth. She might have been taken for 19 or for 30. If her features were criticized separately, she was handsome rather than plain, in spite of the sickly hue of her face. She would have been a good figure, too, if it had not been for her extreme thinness and the size of her head, which was too large for her medium height. But she was not likely to be attractive to men. She was like a fine flower, already past its bloom and without fragrance, though the petals were still unwithered. Moreover, she would have been unattractive to men also from the lack of just what Kitty had too much of the suppressed fire of vitality, and the consciousness of her own attractiveness. She always seemed absorbed in work about which there could be no doubt, and so it seemed she could not take interest in anything outside it. It was just this contrast with her own position that was for Kitty the great attraction of Mademoiselle Varenka. Kitty felt that in her manner of life, she would find an example of what she was now so painfully seeking: interest in life, a dignity in life, apart from the worldly relations of girls with men, which so revolted Kitty, and appeared to her now as a shameful hawking about of goods in search of a purchaser. The more attentively Kitty watched her unknown friend, the more convinced she was this girl was the perfect creature she fancied her, and the more eagerly she wished to make her acquaintance. The two girls used to meet several times a day, and every time they met, Kitty's eyes said, "Who are you? What are you? Are you really the exquisite creature I imagine you to be? But for goodness sake, don't suppose," her eyes added, "that I would force my acquaintance on you. I simply admire you, and like you." "I like you too, and you're very, very sweet, and I should like you better still, if I had time," answered the eyes of the unknown girl. Kitty saw, indeed, that she was always busy. Either she was taking the children of a Russian family home from the Springs, or fetching a shawl for a sick lady, and wrapping her up in it, or trying to interest an irritable invalid, or selecting and buying cakes for tea for someone. Soon after the arrival of the Shtcherbatskoys, there appeared in the morning crowd at the Springs 2 persons who attracted universal and unfavorable attention. These were a tall man with a stooping figure, and huge hands in an old coat too short for him, with black, simple, and yet terrible eyes, and a pock-marked, kind-looking woman, very badly and tastelessly dressed. Recognizing these persons as Russians, Kitty had already in her imagination begun constructing a delightful and touching romance about them. But the princess, having ascertained from the visitors' list that this was Nikolai Levin and Marya Nikolaevna, explained to Kitty what a bad man this Levin was, and all her fancies about these two people vanished. Not so much from what her mother told her as from the fact that it was Constantine's brother. This pair suddenly seemed to Kitty intensely unpleasant. This Levin, with his continual twitching of his head, aroused in her now an irrepressible feeling of disgust. It seemed to her that his big, terrible eyes, which persistently pursued her, expressed a feeling of hatred and contempt, and she tried to avoid meeting him. End of chapter 30. We're back with Kitty. It's been so long. It's been so long. Yeah, she was starting to feel like just a cutout cardboard character, but we're back. Okay, so previously with Kitty, she has fallen ill. And so the remedy is to travel abroad. So she's been gone for a very long time from us. But now we're back with her, and we are in her abroad state, and we get a description of the place and the people that she's interested in seeing and meeting and not interested in seeing and meeting. And who do we see but Levin's brother and wife? Are they married or partner? I know it wasn't the she was sent away because she was sick euphemism for she's pregnant. she's she's pregnant without being married. Yeah, yeah. So exciting to be back with Kitty and seeing what's going on with her and how she's dealing with everything, and also with the, like, including, I should say, the pressure of her mother and father to, like, marry right and well. So, welcome back, Kitty. Chapter 31. It was a wet day. It had been raining all the morning, and the invalids, with their parasols, had flocked into the arcades. Kitty was walking there with her mother and the Moscow colonel, smart and jaunty in his European coat, bought ready-made at Frankfurt. They were walking on one side of the arcade, trying to avoid Levin, who was walking on the other side. Varenka, in her dark dress, in a black hat with a turned-down brim, was walking up and down the whole length of the arcade with a blind Frenchwoman, and every time she met Kitty, they exchanged friendly glances. "Mamma, couldn't I speak to her?" said Kitty, watching her unknown friend and noticing that she was going up to the springs, and that they might come there together. "Oh, if you want to so much, I'll find out about her first, and make her acquaintance myself," answered her mother. "What do you see in her out of the way? A companion she must be. If you like, I'll make acquaintance with Madame Stahl. I used to know her, bien sûr," added the princess, lifting her head haughtily. Kitty knew that the princess was offended that Madame Stahl had seemed to avoid making her acquaintance. Kitty did not insist. "How wonderfully sweet she is," she said, gazing at Varenka, just as she handed a glass to the Frenchwoman. "Look how natural and sweet it all is." "It's so funny to see your engouement," said the princess. "No, we'd better go back," she added, noticing Levin coming towards them with his companion and a German doctor, to whom he was talking very noisily and angrily. They turned to go back, when suddenly they heard, not noisy talk, but shouting. Levin, stopping short, was shouting at the doctor, and the doctor, too, was excited. A crowd gathered about them. The princess and Kitty beat a hasty retreat, while the colonel joined the crowd to find out what was the matter. A few minutes later the colonel overtook them. "What is this?" inquired the princess. "Scandalous and disgraceful," answered the colonel. "The one thing to be dreaded is meeting Russians abroad. That tall gentleman was abusing the doctor, flinging all sorts of insults at him, because he wasn't treating him quite as he liked, and he began waving his stick at him. It's simply a scandal." "Oh, how unpleasant," said the princess. "Well, how did it end?" Luckily, at that point, the one in the mushroom hat intervened. "A Russian lady, I think she is," said the colonel. "Mademoiselle Varenka?" asked Kitty. "Yes, yes, she came to the rescue before anyone. She took the man by the arm and led him away." "There, Mamma," said Kitty. "You wonder that I'm enthusiastic about her." The next day, as she watched her unknown friend, Kitty noticed that Mademoiselle Varenka was already on the same terms with Levin as his companion as with her other protégés. She went up to them, entered into conversation with them, and served as interpreter for the woman, who could not speak any foreign language. Kitty began to entreat her mother still more urgently to let her make friends with Varenka. And, disagreeable as it was to the princess to seem to take the first step in wishing to make the acquaintance of Madame Stahl, who thought fit to give herself airs, she made inquiries about Varenka, and, having ascertained particulars about her tending to prove that there could be no harm, though little good in the acquaintance, she herself approached Varenka and made acquaintance with her. Choosing a time when her daughter had gone to the spring, while Varenka had stopped outside the baker's, the princess went up to her. "Allow me to make your acquaintance," she said, with her dignified smile. "My daughter has lost her heart to you," she said. "Possibly you do not know me. I am—" "That feeling is more than reciprocal, Princess," Varenka answered hurriedly. "What a good deed you did yesterday to our poor compatriot," said the princess. Varenka flushed a little. "Oh, I don't remember. I don't think I did anything," she said. "Why, you saved that Levin from disagreeable consequences." "Yes, Sampanquin called me, and I tried to pacify him. He's very ill and was dissatisfied with the doctor. I'm used to looking after such invalids." "Yes, I've heard you live at Menton with your aunt, I think, Madame Stahl. I used to know her as Belle-Sœur." "Oh, no, she's not my aunt. I call her Mamma, but I am not related to her. I was brought up by her," answered Varenka, flushing a little again. This was so simply said, and so sweet was the truthful and candid expression of her face, that the princess saw why Kitty had taken such a fancy to Varenka. "Well, and what's this going to do?" asked the princess. "Oh, he's going away," answered Varenka. At that instant Kitty came up from the spring, beaming with delight that her mother had become acquainted with her unknown friend. "Well, see, Kitty, your intense desire to make friends with Mademoiselle Varenka," Varenka put in, smiling. "That's what everyone calls me." Kitty blushed with pleasure, and slowly, without speaking, pressed her new friend's hand, which did not respond to her pressure, but lay motionless in her hand. The hand did not respond to her pressure, but the face of Mademoiselle Varenka glowed with soft, glad, though rather mournful smile that showed large but handsome teeth. "I have long wished for this too," she said. "Oh, but you are so busy." "Oh, no, I'm not at all busy," answered Varenka. But at that moment she had to leave her new friends because two little Russian girls, children of an invalid, ran up to her. "Varenka, Mamma's calling," they cried, and Varenka went after them. End of chapter 31. We have a new character, Varenka. Interesting. Okay, so she is there with Madame Stahl, who everybody thought was her aunt because she calls her Mama, but that's not true. She's actually not related to her at all. Madame Stahl just raised her, basically. And Varenka just seems to be like the sweetest, most giving person, and she's one of those people where you can't really tell, is she the one or is it Madame Stahl? One of them, I think it's her. is one of those people where you can't really tell if she's like 19 or if she's 30. She just has that like look, that look like she's either a child or a very, very established adult. And yes, and has passively refused to acknowledge the princess's station. So a little bit of a snub there, which is interesting. And so Princess doesn't feel great about introducing her, and it's just like, well, Madame Stahl has not acknowledged my existence since being here. I don't know about this. But she, instead of going through Madame Stahl, she decides to go through or go directly to Varenka on Kitty's behalf because Kitty wants to be her friend. And at the same time, Kitty is avoiding Levin at all costs. At all costs. And we do get a scene of Levin and a doctor arguing very loudly and very animatedly in the streets, and Varenka is able to like go in and mediate and get everybody aside and everything like that. So I think that is also something interesting to know. She is trustworthy, she's helping the old, she's helping the children. She is just everywhere, and I want to know her secrets. You know she has secrets and she can't just be all saintly all the time. You know? She has some secrets and I want to know them. Every single character here is not just how we meet them. I'm ready to know more about her cuz I'm nosy. Chapter 32. The particulars which the princess had learned in regard to Varenka's past and her relations with Madame Stahl were as follows. Madame Stahl, of whom some people said that she had worried her husband out of his life, while others said it was he who had made her wretched by his immoral behavior, had always been a woman of weak health and enthusiastic temperament. When, after her separation from her husband, she gave birth to her only child, the child had died almost immediately, and the family of Madame Stahl, knowing her sensibility and fearing the news would kill her, had substituted another child, a baby born the same night and in the same house in Petersburg, the daughter of the chief cook of the imperial household. This was Varenka. Madame Stahl learned later on that Varenka was not her own child, but she went on bringing her up, especially as very soon afterwards Varenka had not a relation of her own living. Madame Stahl had now been living more than 10 years continuously abroad in the south, never leaving her couch. And some people said that Madame Stahl had made her social position as a philanthropic, highly religious woman. Other people said she really was at heart the highly ethical being, living for nothing but the good of her fellow creatures, which she represented herself to be. No one knew what her faith was, Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox. But one fact was indubitable. She was in amicable relationship with the highest dignitaries of all the churches and sects. Varenka lived with her all the while abroad, and everyone who knew Madame Stahl knew and liked Mademoiselle Varenka, as everyone called her. Having learned all these facts, the princess found nothing to object to in her daughter's intimacy with Varenka. More especially as Varenka's breeding and education were of the best, she spoke French and English extremely well, and what was the most weight, brought a message from Madame Stahl expressing her regret that she was prevented by her ill health from making the acquaintance of the princess. After getting to know Varenka, Kitty became more and more fascinated by her friend, and every day she discovered new virtues in her. The princess, hearing that Varenka had a good voice, asked her to come and sing to them in the evening. Kitty plays, and we have a piano. Not a good one, it's true, but you will give us so much pleasure. That was the wrong voice, but we're going with it, said the princess with her affected smile, which Kitty disliked particularly just then, because she noticed that Varenka had no inclination to sing. Varenka came, however, in the evening and brought a roll of music with her. The princess had invited Marya Yevgenyevna and her daughter and the colonel. Varenka seemed quite unaffected by there being persons present she did not know, and she went directly to the piano. She could not accompany herself, but she could sing music at sight very well. Kitty, who played well, accompanied her. "You have an extraordinary talent," the princess said to her after Varenka had sung the first song extremely well. Marya Yevgenyevna and her daughter expressed their thanks and admiration. "Look," said the colonel, looking out of the window, "what an audience has collected to listen to you." There actually was quite a considerable crowd under the windows. "Oh, I am very glad it gives you pleasure," Varenka answered simply. Kitty looked with pride at her friend. She was enchanted by her talent and her voice and her face, but most of all by her manner, by the way Varenka obviously thought nothing of her singing and was quite unmoved by their praises. She seemed only to be asking, "Am I to sing again? Or is that enough?" If it had been I, thought Kitty, how proud I would have been, how delighted I would have been to see that crowd under the windows. But she's certainly unmoved by it. Her only motive is to avoid refusing and to please Mamma. What is there in her? What is it gives her the power to look down on everything, to be calm independently of everything? How I should like to know it and to learn it of her, thought Kitty, gazing into her serene face. The princess asked Varenka to sing again, and Varenka sang another song, also smoothly, distinctly, and well, standing at the piano and beating time on it with her thin, dark-skinned hand. The next song in the book was an Italian one. Kitty played the opening bars and looked round at Varenka. Let's skip that," said Varenka, flushing a little. Kitty let her eyes rest on Varenka's face, and with a look of dismay and inquiry. "Very well, the next one," she said hurriedly, turning over the pages and at once feeling that there was something connected with the song. "No," answered Varenka with a smile, laying her hand on the music. "No, let's have that one." And she sang it just as quietly, as coolly, and as well as the others. When she had finished, they all thanked her again and went off to tea. Kitty and Varenka went out into the little garden that adjoined the house. "Am I right, that you have some reminiscence connected with that song?" said Kitty. "Don't tell me," she added hastily. "Only say it if I'm right." "No, why not? I'll tell you simply," said Varenka. And without waiting for a reply, she went on. "Yes, it brings up memories, once painful ones. I cared for someone once, and I used to sing him that song." Kitty, with big, wide open eyes, gazed silently, sympathetically, at Varenka. "I cared for him, and he cared for me. But his mother did not wish it, and he married another girl. He's living now not far from us, and I see him sometimes. You didn't think I had a love story, too?" she said, and there was a faint gleam in her handsome face of that fire which Kitty felt must once have glowed all over her. "I didn't think so. Why, if I were a man, I would never care for anyone else after knowing you. Only I can't understand how he could, to please his mother, forget you and make you unhappy. He has no heart." "Oh, no, he's a very good man. And I'm not unhappy, quite the contrary. I'm very happy. Well, So we shan't be singing any more now, she added, turning towards the house. Oh, how good you are! How good you are! Cried Kitty, and stopping her, she kissed her. If I could only be even a little like you. Why should you be like me? Why should you be like anyone? You're nice as you are, said Varenka, smiling her gentle, weary smile. No, I'm not nice at all. Come, tell me. Stop a minute, let's sit down, said Kitty, making her sit down again beside her. Tell me, isn't it humiliating to think that a man has disdained your love, that he hasn't cared for it? But he didn't disdain it. I believe he cared for me. But he was a dutiful son, yes, but if it hadn't been on account of his mother, if it had been his own doing, said Kitty, feeling she was giving away her secret, and that her face, burning with the flush of shame, had betrayed her already. Well, in that case, he would have done wrong, and I should not have regretted him, answered Varenka, evidently realizing that they were now talking not of her, but of Kitty. But the humiliation, said Kitty, the humiliation one can never forget, she said, remembering her look at the last ball during the pause in the music. Where's the humiliation? Why, you did nothing wrong. Worse than wrong. Shameful. Varenka shook her head and laid her hand on Kitty's hand. Why, what is there shameful? She said. You didn't tell a man who didn't care for you that you loved him, did you? Well, of course not. I never said a word. But he knew it. No, there are looks, there are ways. I can't forget it, if I live 100 years. Why so? I don't understand. The whole point is whether you love him now or not, said Varenka, who called everything by its name. Well, I hate him. I can't forgive myself. Why? What for? The shame, the humiliation. Ugh, if everyone were as sensitive as you are, said Varenka. There isn't a girl who hasn't been through the same, and it's all so unimportant. Why? What is important? Said Kitty, looking into her face with inquisitive wonder. Oh, there's so much that's important, said Varenka, smiling. Why? What? Oh, so much that's more important, answered Varenka, not knowing what to say. But at that instant they heard the princess's voice from the window. Kitty, it's cold. Either get a shawl or come inside. It really is time to go in, said Varenka, getting up. I have to go on to Madame Berth's. She asked me to. Kitty held her by the hand, and with passionate curiosity and entreaty her eyes asked her, What is it? What is this of such importance that gives you such tranquillity? You know. Tell me. But Varenka did not even know what Kitty's eyes were asking her. She merely thought that she had to go to see Madame Berth, too, that evening, and to make haste home in time for Maman's tea at 12 o'clock. She went indoors, collected her music, and saying goodbye to everyone, was about to go. Allow me to see you home, said the colonel. Yes, how can you go alone at night like this? Chimed in the princess. Anyway, I'll send Parasha. Kitty saw that Varenka could hardly restrain a smile at the idea that she needed an escort. No, I always go about alone, and nothing ever happens to me, she said, taking her hat, and kissing Kitty once more without saying what was important. She stepped out courageously with the music under her arm, and vanished into the twilight of the summer night, bearing away with her her secret of what was important, and what gave her the calm and dignity so much to be envied. End of chapter 32. Okay, so Kitty and Varenka are now hanging out, and Varenka is just effortlessly perfect in everything, it seems like. They're singing a song Varenka's voice is just so, so beautiful. So beautiful, in fact, that people outside of the window have gathered to listen, which is just insane. And we wiggle out that Varenka has had like a past love that she still sees sometimes in the area, but he has since married somebody else, and he was just doing what his mother wanted him to do, and she holds no ill will, and there are much more important things in life than that. And so Kitty kind of tells her story, but not really. Like, it's a little subtle and it gets more and more bold, but still has not explicitly said what's going on. And Varenka just keeps saying, there's so much more that's more important. And Kitty's like, okay, yeah, but like, what is it that's more important? And Varenka doesn't actually answer her. She just keeps saying, there's so much more that's more important. And then she has to leave. She has to go to somebody else's house and get tea and all of these things. And at the beginning of the chapter, we actually do get some of our questions answered about Varenka. And she is actually not the birth daughter of Madame Stahl, but she was actually the cook's daughter. But Madame Stahl lost her daughter, and the daughter of the cook was born on the same day. So she just now has the cook's daughter. And she eventually figured out what had happened, but she decided to keep raising her as she was her own. But it is not like a secret between them. They both know this. They being Madame Stahl and Varenka. And I think that's all that's happened. Chapter 33. Kitty made the acquaintance of Madame Stahl too. And this acquaintance, together with her friendship with Varenka, did not merely exercise a great influence on her. It also comforted her in her mental distress. She found this comfort through a completely new world being opened up to her by means of this acquaintance, a world having nothing in common with her past, an exalted, noble world, from the height of which she could contemplate her past calmly. It was revealed to her that besides the instinctive life to which Kitty had given herself up hitherto, there was a spiritual life. This life was disclosed in religion, but a religion having nothing in common with that one with which Kitty had known from childhood, and which found expression in litanies and all-night services at the widow's home, where one might meet one's friends, and in learning by heart Slavonic texts with the priest. This was a lofty, mysterious religion connected with a whole series of noble thoughts and feelings, which one could do more than merely believe because one was told to, which one could love. Kitty found all this out not from words. Madame Stahl talked to Kitty as to a charming child that one looks on with pleasure as on the memory of one's youth, and only once she said in passing that in all human sorrows nothing gives comfort but love and faith, and that in the sight of Christ's compassion for us no sorrow is trifling, and immediately talked of other things. But in every gesture of Madame Stahl, in every word, in every heavenly, as Kitty called it, look, and above all the whole story of her life, which she heard from Varenka, Kitty recognized that something that was important, of which till then she had known nothing. Yet, elevated as Madame Stahl's character was, touching as was her story, and exalted and moving as was her speech, Kitty could not help detecting in her some traits which perplexed her. She noticed that when questioning her about her family, Madame Stahl had smiled contemptuously, which was not in accord with Christian meekness. She noticed, too, that when she had found a Catholic priest with her, Madame Stahl had studiously kept her face in the shadow of the lampshade, and had smiled in a peculiar way. Trivial as these two observations were, they perplexed her, and she had her doubts as to Madame Stahl. But on the other hand, Varenka, alone in the world, without father without friends or relations, with a melancholy disappointment in the past, desiring nothing, regretting nothing, was just that perfection of which Kitty dared hardly dream. In Varenka she realized that one has but to forget oneself and love others, and one will be calm, happy, and noble. And that was what Kitty longed to be, seeing how clearly what was the most important. Kitty was not satisfied with being enthusiastic over it. She at once gave herself up with her whole soul to the new life that was coming to her. From Varenka's accounts of the doings of Madame Stahl and other people whom she mentioned, Kitty had already constructed the plan of her own future life. She would, like Madame Stahl's niece, Aline, of whom Varenka had talked to her a great deal, seek out those who were in trouble, wherever she might be living, help them as far as she could, give them the gospel, read the gospel to the sick, to criminals, to the dying. The idea of reading the gospel to criminals, as Aline did, particularly fascinated Kitty. But all these were secret dreams, of which Kitty did not talk either to her mother or to Varenka. While awaiting the time for carrying out her plans on a large scale, however, Kitty, even then at the Springs, where there were so many people ill and unhappy, readily found a chance for practicing her new principles in imitation of Varenka. At first, the princess noticed nothing but that Kitty was much under the influence of her engouement, as she called it, for Madame Stahl, and still more for Varenka. She saw that Kitty did not merely imitate Varenka in her conduct, but unconsciously imitated her in her manner of walking, of talking, of blinking her eyes. But later on the princess noticed that, apart from this adoration, some kind of serious spiritual change was taking place in her daughter. The princess saw that the evenings Kitty read a French testament that Madame Stahl had given her, a thing she had never done before, that she avoided society, acquaintances, and associated with the sick people who were under Varenka's protection, and especially one poor family, that of a sick painter, Petrov. Kitty was unmistakably proud of playing the part of a sister of mercy in that family. All this was well enough, and the princess had nothing to say against it, especially as Petrov's wife was a perfectly nice sort of woman, and that the German princess, noticing Kitty's devotion, praised her, calling her an angel of consolation. All this would have been very well if there had been no exaggeration. But the princess saw that her daughter was rushing into extremes, and so indeed she told her. Her daughter made no reply. Only in her heart she thought that one could not talk about exaggeration where Christianity was concerned. What exaggeration could there be in the practice of a doctrine wherein one was bidden to turn the other cheek when one was smitten, and give one's cloak if one's coat were taken? But the princess disliked this exaggeration, and disliked even more the fact that she felt her daughter did not care to show her all her heart. Kitty did in fact conceal her new views and feelings from her mother. She concealed them not because she did not respect or did not love her mother, but simply because she was her mother. She would have revealed them to anyone sooner than to her mother. "How is Anna Pavlovna's not been to see us for so long?" the princess said one day of Madame Petrova. "I've asked her, But she seems put out about something. No, I've not noticed it, maman, said Kitty, flushing hotly. Is it long since you went to see them? We're meaning to make an expedition to the mountains tomorrow, answered Kitty. Well, you can go, answered the princess, gazing at her daughter's embarrassed face and trying to guess the cause of her embarrassment. That day, Varenka came to dinner and told them that Anna Pavlovna had changed her mind and given up the expedition for the morrow. And the princess noticed again that Kitty reddened. Kitty, haven't you had some misunderstanding with the Petrovs? Said the princess when they were left alone. Why has she given up sending the children and coming to see us? Kitty answered that nothing had happened between them, and that she could not tell why Anna Pavlovna seemed displeased with her. Kitty answered, perfectly truly, she did not know the reason Anna Pavlovna had changed to her, but she guessed it. She guessed at something which she could not tell her mother, which she could not put into words to herself. It was one of those things which one knows but which one can never speak of even to oneself. So terrible and shameful would it be to be mistaken. Again and again she went over in her memory all her relations with the family. She remembered the simple delight expressed on the round, good-humored face of Anna Pavlovna at their meetings. She remembered their secret confabulations about the invalid, their plots to draw him away from the work which was forbidden him, and to get him out of doors, the devotion of the youngest boy who used to call her "my Kitty," and would not go to bed without her. How nice it all was. Then she recalled the thin, terribly thin figure of Petrov, and his long neck, in his brown coat, his scant, curly hair, his questioning blue eyes that were so terrible to Kitty at first, and his painful attempts to seem hearty and lively in her presence. She recalled the efforts she had made at first to overcome the repugnance she felt for him, as for all consumptive people, and the pains it had cost her to think of things to say to him. She recalled the timid, softened look with which he gazed at her, and the strange feeling of compassion and awkwardness, and later of a sense of her own goodness, which she had felt at it. How nice it all was. But all that was at first. Now, a few days ago, everything was suddenly spoiled. Anna Pavlovna had met Kitty with affected cordiality, and had kept continual watch on her, and on her husband. Could that touching pleasure he showed when she came near to be the cause of Anna Pavlovna's coolness? Yes, she mused. There was something unnatural about Anna Pavlovna, and utterly unlike her good nature, when she said angrily the day before yesterday, "There, he will keep waiting for you. He wouldn't drink his coffee without you, though he's grown so dreadfully weak." Yes, perhaps, too, she didn't like it when I gave him the rug. It was all so simple, but he took it so awkwardly, and was so long thanking me that I felt awkward, too. And then that portrait of me he did so well, and most of all that look of confusion and tenderness. Yes, yes, that's it, Kitty repeated to herself with horror. No, it can't be. It oughtn't to be. He's so much to be pitied, she said to herself directly after. This doubt poisoned the charm of her new life. End of chapter 33. All right, so we have found out what is the most important. What is more important than getting married and being loved by a boy who you also love, that Varenka was talking about but didn't actually answer. And it is service. It is the act of service and like realizing that you are just a small little person and the world is just so, so big. And you being, fortunate in your situation can and should be helping others and finding purpose in doing that. And also religion is involved in this as well. And so Kitty has started to do that to serve man. Yeah, exactly. Kitty has started to do that and has started to um, attend to this one family in particular, and the the husband is the one who is very, very sickly. There are children as well, and Kitty has started to like take care of them. And at first she was like kind of disgusted because she hasn't really had experience being around people who were so, so sickly and just in so much need. And so she starts helping him, and it's a little awkward because she just doesn't know how to do what she's doing and whatever. And then the relationship changes and it becomes more one-sided. And Kitty is now realizing why Anna Pavlovna might be not as friendly as she used to be to Kitty's mom or to Kitty. And it's because she might think that something's going on because her husband is drawing portraits of Kitty and is not, eating unless Kitty is there, and is, just these like things just becoming more, not obsessed, but like just more involved when she's around, and seeing her as like a higher entity and being thankful for her, and maybe more. And Kitty is like, no, that's not what's happening. It's just because I'm doing this. And so she has that like internal dialogue of like, wait, maybe that is why, because I've noticed all of these things, and maybe that's why Anna Pavlovna has yelled at me the other day. She sees the seeds of her own downfall. Exactly, exactly. And she's like, wait a minute. I started this new life. How is it not all sunshine and roses and daisies? What? So, exciting stuff. Exciting stuff. Chapter 34. Before the end of the course of drinking the waters, Prince Sherbatskoy, who had gone on from Carlsbad to Baden and Kissingen to Russian friends to get a breath of Russian air, as he said, came back to his wife and daughter. The views of the prince and of the princess on life abroad were completely opposed. The princess thought everything delightful, and in spite of her established position in Russian society, she tried abroad to be like a European fashionable lady, which she was not, for the simple reason that she was a typical Russian gentlewoman, and so she was affected, which did not altogether suit her. The prince, on the contrary, thought everything foreign detestable, got sick of European life, kept to his Russian habits, and purposely tried to show himself abroad less European than he was in reality. The prince returned thinner, with his skin hanging in loose bags on his cheeks, but in the most cheerful frame of mind. His good humor was even greater when he saw Kitty completely recovered. The news of Kitty's friendship with Madame Stahl and Varenka, and the reports the princess gave him of some kind of change she had noticed in Kitty, troubled the prince and aroused his habitual feeling of jealousy of something that drew his daughter away from him, and a dread that his daughter might have got out of his reach of his influence in regions inaccessible to him. But these unpleasant matters were all drowned in the sea of kindliness and good humor which was always within him, and more so than ever since his course of Carlsbad waters. The day after his arrival, the prince, in his long overcoat, with his Russian wrinkles and baggy cheeks propped up by a starched collar, set off with his daughter to a spring in the greatest good humor. It was a lovely morning. The bright, cheerful houses with their little gardens, the sight of the red-faced, red-armed, beer-drinking German waitresses working away merrily did the heart good. But the nearer they got to the springs, the oftener they met sick people, and their appearance seemed more pitiable than ever among the everyday conditions of preposterous German life. Kitty was no longer struck by this contrast. The bright sun, the brilliant green of the foliage, the strains of the music were for her the natural setting of all these familiar faces, with their changes to greater emaciation or to convalescence, for which she watched. But to the prince the brightness and gaiety of the June morning, and the sound of the orchestra playing a waltz then in fashion, and above all, the appearance of the healthy attendants, seemed something unseemly and monstrous, in conjunction with these slowly moving, dying figures gathered together from all parts of Europe. In spite of his feeling of pride and, as it were, of the return of youth, with his favorite daughter on his arm, he felt awkward, and almost ashamed of his vigorous step and his sturdy, stout limbs. He felt almost like a man not dressed in a crowd. "Present me to your new friends," he said to his daughter, squeezing her hand with his elbow. "I like even your horrid sodden for making you so well again. Only it's melancholy, very melancholy here. Who's that?" Kitty mentioned the names of all the people they met, with some of whom she was acquainted, and some not. At the entrance of the garden they met the blind lady, Madame Berthe, with her guide, and the prince was delighted to see the old Frenchwoman's face light up when she heard Kitty's voice. She at once began talking to him with French exaggerated politeness, applauding him for having such a delightful daughter, extolling Kitty to the skies before her face, and calling her a treasure, a pearl, and a consoling angel. "Well, she's the second angel, then," said the prince, smiling. "She calls Mademoiselle Varenka angel number 1. "Oh, Mademoiselle Varenka, she's the real angel, allez," Madame Berthe assented. In the arcade they met Varenka herself. She was walking rapidly towards them, carrying an elegant red bag. "Here is Papa come," Kitty said to her. Varenka made, simply and naturally, as she did everything, a movement between a bow and a curtsy, and immediately began talking to the prince without shyness, naturally, as she talked to everyone. "Of course I know you. I know you very well," the prince said to her with a smile, in which Kitty detected the joy that her father liked her friend. "Where are you off to in such a haste?" "Maman's here," she said, turning to Kitty. "She has not slept all night, and the doctor advised her to go out. I'm taking her work." "So that's angel number 1," said the prince, when Varenka had gone on. Kitty saw that her father had meant to make fun of Varenka, but that he could not do it because he liked her. "Come, so we shall see all your friends," he went on, "even Madame Stahl if she deigns to recognize me." "Why did you know her, Papa?" Kitty asked apprehensively, catching the gleam of irony that kindled in the prince's eyes at the mention of Madame Stahl. "I used to know her husband, and her too a little, before she joined the Pietists." "What is a Pietist, Papa?" asked Kitty, dismayed to find that what she prized so highly in Madame Stahl had a name. "Well, I don't quite know myself. I only know that she thanks God for everything, for every misfortune, and thanks God, too, that her husband died. That's very droll, as they didn't get on together." "Who's that? What a pious face!" he asked, noticing a stick man of medium height sitting on a bench, wearing a brown overcoat and white trousers that fell in strange folds about his long, fleshless legs. This man lifted his straw hat, showed his scanty curly hair and high forehead, painfully reddened by the pressure of the hat. "Oh, that's Petrov, an artist," answered Kitty, blushing. "And that's his wife," she added, indicating Anna Pavlovna, who, as though on purpose, at the very instant they approached, walked away after a child that had run off along a path. "Poor fellow! And what a nice face he has," said the prince. "Why don't you go up to him? He wanted to speak to you." "Well, let us go on, then," said Kitty, turning round resolutely. "How are you feeling today?" she asked Petrov. Petrov got up, leaning on his stick, and looked shyly at the prince. "This is my daughter," said the prince. "Let me introduce myself." The painter bowed and smiled, showing his strangely dazzling white teeth. "We expected you yesterday." "Oh, wrong voice. Oopsie-doopsie." "We expected you yesterday, princess," he said to Kitty. He staggered as he said this, and then repeated the motion, trying to make it seem as if it had been intentional. "I meant to come, but Varenka said that Anna Pavlovna sent word you were not going." "Not going," said Petrov, blushing and immediately beginning to cough, and his eyes sought his wife. "Anita! Anita!" he said loudly, and the swollen veins stood out like cords on his thin, white neck. Anna Pavlovna came up. "So you sent word to the princess that we weren't going," he whispered to her angrily, losing his voice. "Good morning, princess," said Anna Pavlovna with an assumed smile, utterly unlike her former manner. "Very glad to make your acquaintance," she said to the prince. "We've long been expected, prince." "What did you send word to the princess that we weren't going for?" the artist whispered hoarsely once more, still more angrily, obviously exasperated that his voice failed him, so that he could not give his words the expression he would have liked to. "Oh, mercy on us, I thought we weren't going," his wife answered crossly. "What when—" He coughed, then waved his hand. The prince took off his hat and moved away with his daughter. "Ah," he sighed deeply, "poor things." "Yes, papa," answered Kitty. "And you must know they've 3 children, no servant, and scarcely any means. He gets something from the academy," she went on briskly, trying to drown the distress that the odd change in Anna Pavlovna's manner to her had aroused in her. "Oh, here's Madame Stahl," said Kitty, indicating an invalid carriage, where, propped on pillows, something in grey and blue was lying under the sunshade. This was Madame Stahl. Behind her stood the gloomy, healthy-looking German woman, who pushed the carriage. Close by was standing a flaxen-headed Swedish count, whom Kitty knew by name. Several invalids were lingering near the low carriage, staring at the lady as though she were some curiosity. The prince went up to her, and Kitty detected that disconcerting gleam of irony in his eyes. He went up to Madame Stahl and addressed her with extreme courtesy and affability in that excellent French that so few speak nowadays. "I don't know if you remember me, but I must recall myself to thank you for your kindness to my daughter," he said, taking off his hat and not putting it on again. "Prince Alexander Shtcherbatskoy," said Madame Stahl, lifting upon him her heavenly eyes, in which Kitty discerned a look of annoyance. "Delighted. I have taken a great fancy to your daughter." "You are still in weak health?" "Yes, I'm used to it," said Madame Stahl, and she introduced the prince to the Swedish count. "You are scarcely changed at all," the prince said to her. "It's 10 or 11 years since I had the honor of seeing you." "Yes, God sends the cross and sends the strength to bear it. Often one wonders what is the goal of this life. The other side," she said angrily to Varenka, who had rearranged the rug over her feet, not to her satisfaction. "To do good, probably," said the prince with a twinkle in his eye. "That is not for us to judge," said Madame Stahl, perceiving the shade of expression on the prince's face. "So you will send me that book, dear Count? I'm very grateful to you," she said to the young Swede. "Ah!" cried the prince, catching sight of the Moscow colonel standing near, and with a bow to Madame Stahl he walked away with his daughter and the Moscow colonel, who joined them. "That's our aristocracy prince," the Moscow colonel said, with ironical intention. He cherished a grudge against Madame Stahl for not making his acquaintance. "She's just the same," replied the prince. "Did you know her before her illness, Prince? That's to say, before she took to her bed?" "Yes, she took to her bed before my eyes," said the prince. "They say it's 10 years since she has stood on her feet. She doesn't stand up because her legs are too short. She's a very bad figure." "Papa, that's not possible," cried Kitty. That's what wicked tongues say, my darling. And your Varenka catches it too," he added. "Oh, these invalid ladies." "No, Papa," Kitty objected warmly. "Varenka worships her. And then she does so much good. Ask anyone. Everyone knows her and Aline Stahl." "Perhaps so," said the prince, squeezing her hand with his elbow. "But it's better when one does good, so that you may ask everyone, and no one knows." Kitty did not answer, not because she had nothing to say, but because she did not care to reveal her secret thoughts, even to her father. But strange to say, although she had so made up her mind not to be influenced by her father's views, not to let him into her innermost sanctum, she felt that the heavenly image of Madame Stahl, which she had carried for a whole month in her heart, had vanished, never to return, just as the fantastic figure made up of some clothes thrown down at random vanishes when one sees that it is only some garments lying there. All that was left was a woman with short legs, who lay down because she had a bad figure, and worried patient Varenka for not arranging her rug to her liking, and by no effort of the imagination could Kitty bring back the former Madame Stahl. End of chapter 34. Papa's back. Papa Prince is back. It's interesting. There's a mention between the differences of how Mama Princess and Papa Prince are handling being abroad. Mama Princess is like, I am going to try as hard as I possibly can to be as European as allowed as possible. I'm going to be the most European and it'll be great and I'm going to have a great time. And then Papa Prince is like, I hate everything to do with European. Everything European. I hate it. I hate it. I'm going to be more Russian than ever imagined in this place. And so while Kitty and Mama Princess are here, Papa Prince has been traveling around and he has just returned back to their abroad dwelling. And Kitty is very excited that he's there and gonna go show him around everything. And Papa Prince has noticed a very dramatic change in Kitty. She is much more animated. She looks much better. Like she's just happier, it seems, than when he left. And so they're walking around, and we do meet Petrov, and we have a weird moment with between him and his wife, because his wife was trying to keep Kitty away and basically said like a lie, and it has been found out. And Petrov is like, how dare you, Anita, say this thing? Like, why do you lie? So that's a weird moment. And we do meet Madame Stahl, and we do meet Varenka, and Papa Prince has opinions on both of those things. And Papa Prince's thoughts on Madame Stahl are very much making her human and an actual just person. And that has changed now how Kitty has seen her. Kitty has seen her as like up on a pedestal, and how she can do no wrong because she is serving a greater purpose, and she is able to help people beyond her realm and outside of like her own selfish being. And now Kitty sees her as somebody who is just a small woman complaining that Varenka messed up how her blankets have been arranged. Interesting. Interesting. It was a pleasure. I'm still enjoying this book. I'm still having a good time. The book itself is not a romp, but I'm having a romp. I'm romping for everybody. Thanks, everybody, for being here. It was a pleasure. As always, whether you lurk, whether you chat, I 1000% appreciate you. And I 1000% appreciate your support. If I don't see you next time, hope to see you very soon.